Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Jagannatha Jaya Baladeva Jaya Subhadra Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Gurudev 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 Jaya Jaya Gurudev Nitai Go Premanandi Jayom Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Stotra Shishi Mother's Divine Grace Shila Abhay Charanarvinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Shila Prabhupada Ki Jayom Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivajagacharya Stotra Shishi Mother's Divine Grace Shila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Shila Prabhupada Ki Ananta Kori Vaishnava Vrind Ki Shila Haridas Thakur Ki प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद की श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंज राधा कुंज गिरि गोवर्धन की श्री वृंदावन धाम की श्री मथुरा धाम की श्री जगन्नाथपुरी धाम की श्री गंगा माई की यमुना माई की श्री भक्ति देवी की सामवेद श्री भक्त वृंद की Srila Prabhupada Transcendental Book Distribution Ki, Srila Prabhupada Transcendental Prasadam Distribution Ki, the most auspicious occasion Sri Ram Navami Ki, Nitai Go Premanandi, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. Hare Krishna. Wishing everyone a very auspicious Sri Ram Navami. So today marks a very important festival in the Gaudiya Vaishnava calendar. And this evening, when we walk into a restaurant, there are different categories. There are appetizers and there are mains. So the mains are going to come this evening. His Grace Asim Prabhu will be speaking in the glories of Ram Katha. This morning, it's my great fortune to be here, and thank you all. This morning, we'll be speaking from the first canto, chapter 3, verse 22, that's on the board. But before we read, we recite the invocation. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So, Canto 1, Chapter 3, titled Krishna is the source of all incarnations, and verse 22. Nara deva tvamapana Sura karya chitirshaya Samudra nigrahadini Chakre viryanyata param Nara deva tvamapana Sura karya chikirshaya Samudra nigrahadini Chakre viryanyata param Naradevatvamapana Surakarya Chikirshaya Samudra Nigrahadini Chakre Viryanyata Param Naradevatmamapana Surakarya Chikirshaya Mudratigrahadini Chakre Viryanyata Param Naradevatamapana Surakarya Chikirshaya Samudra Nigrahadini Chakre Viryanyata Param Naradevatamapana Surakarya Chikirshaya Vigrahadini Chakre Viryanyata Param Naradevatmamapana Surakarya Chikirshaya Samudra Nigrahadini Chakre Viryanyata Param Naradevatvamapana Surakarya Chikirshaya Samudra Nigrahadini Chakre Viryanyata Param. Naradevatvamapana Surakarya Chikirshaya Samudra Nigrahadini Chakre Viryanyata Param. Word for word translation. Nara, human being. Devatvam, divinity. Apana, having assumed the form of. Sura, the demigods. Karya, activities. Chikirshaya, for the purpose of performing. Samudra, the Indian Ocean. Nigrahadini, controlling, etc. Chakre, did perform. Viryani, superhuman prowess. Ataparam, thereafter. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Abhay Charana Ravinda Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki. Translation. In the 18th incarnation, the Lord appeared as King Rama in order to perform some pleasing work for the demigods. He exhibited superhuman powers by controlling the Indian Ocean and then killing the atheist King Ravana, who was on the other side of the sea. Purport. The personality of Godhead, Sri Rama, assumed the form of a human being and appeared on the earth for the purpose of doing some pleasing work for the demigods or the administrative personalities to maintain the order of the universe. Sometimes great demons and atheists like Ravana and Hiranyakashipu and many others become very famous due to advancing material civilization by the help of material science and other activities with the spirit of challenging the established order of the Lord. For example, the attempt to fly to other planets by material means is a challenge to the established order. The conditions of each and every planet are different, and different classes of human beings are accommodated there for particular purposes mentioned in the codes of the Lord. But puffed up by tiny success and material advancement, sometimes the godless materialists challenged the existence of God. Ravana was one of them, and he wanted to deport ordinary men to the planet of Indra, heaven, where material means, without consideration of the necessary qualifications. He wanted a staircase to be built up, directly reaching the heavenly planet, so that people might not be required to undergo the routine of pious work necessary to enter that planet. He also wanted to perform other acts against the established rule of the Lord. He even challenged the authority of Sri Ram, the personality of Godhead, and kidnapped his wife Sita. Of course, Lord Ram had to come to chastise such atheists, answering the prayer and desire of the demigods. He therefore took up the challenge of Ravana, and the complete activity is the subject matter of the Ramayana. Because Lord Ramachandra was the personality of Godhead, he exhibited superhuman activities which no human being, including the materially advanced Ravana, could perform. Lord Ramachandra prepared a royal road on the Indian Ocean with stones that floated on the water. The modern scientists have done research in the area of weightlessness, but it is not possible to bring in weightlessness anywhere and everywhere. But because weightlessness is the creation of the Lord by which He can make the gigantic planet fly and float in the air, He made the stones even within this earth to be weightless and prepared a stone bridge on the sea without any supporting pillar. That is the display of the power of God. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakanvitam Cha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Shute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpa Tirubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. Again, happy Ram Navami, everyone. It's indeed an honor and privilege to be speaking here amidst such glorious Vaishnavas. I beg for the blessings of each and every one of you and the ones that are watching on Mayapur TV to bless me in a way that whatever I speak is the glorification of the Lord and our acharyas. So today being Sri Ram Navami, again, if you look at it historically, the Krishna Balaram Mandir was inaugurated on this day. So, very important day for us to meditate, introspect on the pastimes of Sri Ramachandra. And as we read this beautiful purport by Srila Prabhupada in chapter 3 of the first canto, clearly highlighting the difference between the Lord and us. How the Lord can do, even though appearing as a human, he can do so many superhuman activities, which even today is inconceivable to us. I remember when I would go, and for some reason or the other, while growing up, and even after I became a devotee, when I would go to, especially in America, where we would have book distribution stalls at various temples on the occasion of Diwali and at other times. For a Diwali book stall, we would take the Krishna book, and we would say, "Here you go, Happy Diwali." And Krishna book is like, "Hey, but this is Diwali is the glorification of Lord Ram, whereas Ramayana." I said, if you read the Krishna book, the pastime of Krishna, you'll appreciate Lord Ram more, and Lord Ram not different from Krishna. Oh, no, we like Lord Ramchandra as the Maryadam Purushottama. He's the ideal human being, ideal king, ideal son, and ideal in every respect, and his behavior is exemplary for all of us. So, like that, people, especially that are more conversant with the Vedic tradition, and especially growing in India, have more affinity towards Lord Ram than Krishna, and for the purpose because he was an ideal human being. But again, as we know, Krishna can cover himself from people he covers himself just because Krishna can be a bit difficult to understand. So, for the purpose of this morning session, I would like to speak of some valuable lessons from the pastime of Lord Ramachandra that I'd happened to stumble upon a book by His Grace Chaitanya Prabhu, and one lecture, Srila Prabhupada. So I'd just like to highlight some key points that are described in these pastimes, which to me was very illuminating, and also served as a wake-up call for me as a practicing devotee, and how to see my anarthas and how to work on my anarthas, or my conditioning, and how can I make further progress in bhakti. So, the first pastime that I'd like to speak on is the conflict that starts off in the Ramayana. And as we read a spiritual literature, a lot of times we take shelter of a spiritual practice because we are so frustrated in our conditioned life. We see, there's duality everywhere. Today we are happy, tomorrow something strikes us, and we just feel so frustrated by it that we take shelter of a spiritual practice. And then we open the Ramayana, and guess what we see at the very beginning? A conflict. Maybe I got the wrong book, but similarly in the Bhagavatam too, we see in the first canto, not too far into it, but we see a conflict that happens between Ashwatthama and Arjuna. So however here there's this conflict that happens that described is between Kaikai and the father of Lord Ramachandra, that is King Dashrath. Now, the point that's made here in this pastime, or the lesson that we take away, is the devastation that's caused by disinformation. That's what this pastime, the key lesson that underlies this pastime is. So, as the pastime unfolds, when King Dashrath had 4 sons, Lord Ramachandra, Lakshman, Bharat, and Shatrughna, and as per the ancestry, and as it goes, as per the Kshatriya code of conduct, is that the first son becomes the heir to the throne, and Lord Ramachandra was the preferred heir to the throne, and everyone loved Lord Ramachandra more than their own lives. So much so on that they couldn't even think of a time where they be separated from Lord Ramachandra. So King Dashrath knew of this And he consulted with his various advisors that this is my heartfelt desire. I think I've passed my life, and now it's time for me to retire, and I would like to appoint Ramachandra as the next king. What are your thoughts? And unanimously, the whole cabinet approved of it. And they said, yes, I think that's the best decision that you have come up with. So King Dasharatha asked, okay, when can I do it? They said, tomorrow morning. Because obviously the sages understand, they could see through the constellation and the various auspicious times that were there. So they said, tomorrow is the time. So okay, fair enough. However, it happened to be at that very moment, Bharat and Shatrughna had to attend to their, I believe Kaikeyi's father had a longing to see Bharat. So it just happened to be by chance that Bharat and Shatrughna had to be away that night, or maybe that coming week, to be attending to their grandfather. However, King Dasharatha was elated, and he called for everyone to get ahead with the program, that tomorrow is the great coronation, so please go ahead and get the festivities started. Whilst all this was going on, as always, there's someone there to, as I say, there has to be some drama. So there goes, start of the drama. So as we all know, King Dasharatha had 4 wives, 3 wives, and Kaushalya was the oldest, and then the youngest was Kaikeyi. And Kaikeyi was, you can say, the most preferred wife, or she was most dear to King Dasharatha. And she had a maid servant named Mantra, who physically was also a hunchback. So when Mantra heard this news that Ram will be the king, it sparked a great deal of insecurity within her, that, oh my God, tomorrow when Ram becomes the king, that means Kaushalya will be the mother of the king. So all the privileges that I've had by serving under Kaikeyi will all be stripped away. I'll be just looked upon as a regular maidservant. So all these things started stirring up or agitating her mind. And I'll get into it later, as the Acharya described. When we read these pastimes, we should identify with these pastimes that there are certain anarthas within us that are being highlighted through these pastimes. So rather than being an observer to these pastimes, we should be the participant. We should identify with these personalities, because we have these certain anarthas. As Srila Prabhupada always said, there was one Ravana in Hiranyakashipu, in Satya Yuga and Treta Yuga, in Kali Yuga there are many Ravanas in Hiranyakashipu. So, and they're all within us. So, we can't say, oh, we won't act like Ravana. So, Mantra, seeing what is about to befall upon her, goes to Kaikeyi. And she goes to Kaikeyi, and then Kaikeyi is just, I think, resting. And she tells Kaikeyi, have you heard something? And Kaikeyi obviously didn't know what was happening. She said, no, Mantra, why have you come at this time of the night? What's up? And she's like, oh, looks like you haven't heard. And she says, actually tomorrow, Ramachandra is going to be the king of Ayodhya. This is just fresh news off the mill. Tomorrow morning is the coronation of Ramachandra. And Kaikeyi is like, what? Oh, Ramachandra is going to be the king? Here you go, take my necklace and just go away. Let me go ahead with the program. Let me go ahead and arrange everything for tomorrow morning. Because it is described that Kaikeyi loved Lord Ramachandra more than her own son. In fact, when Lord Ramachandra, along with the others, other brothers came back from the Gurukul, came back from their training, came back to Ayodhya, it is said that first, Kaikeyi was the first one to run and embrace Lord Ram, even before she would embrace her own son, her own biological son, Bharat. So Kaikeyi was so excited to hear this news that, oh, tomorrow finally, I'll be able to see my Lord, to see my son being coronated as the king. And Mantra is like, you silly, naive woman, don't you know why all this is happening? And Kaikeyi is like, what are you talking about? This is the best news I've heard. And you're telling me that you're trying to tell me there's something more to it? And Kaikeyi is like, do you know if tomorrow Ram becomes the king, Kaushalya will be the mother of the king, and you will immediately be, dethroned of all your privileges. You'll just be like one other queen of the, of Dashrath. No one would even respect you. And it is described, even though they were co-wives, but there was a lot of love and respect amongst all three of them, and then they all lived, harmoniously between themselves. And Kaikeyi was like, Kaushalya, just like my sister, what are you talking about? I can't even think of Kaushalya doing this to me. And then Mantra is like, okay, this doesn't work. Finally she says, do you know? Don't you even know that why is there such urgency in making Ram the king? Why couldn't have Dashrath waited, for some more time? And Kaikeyi is like, yeah, maybe there's, my dear Lord and husband must have consulted the sages and then come up with this. She said, no, that's because Bharat is away. Because Bharat is not here, that's why there's this sense of urgency that has, that if Ram, because, and from what I've heard, the other acharyas had said that when Dashrath was marrying Kaikeyi, he had promised the father of Kaikeyi that your son will be the king. So Mantra was obviously there when she was hearing the king and King Dashrath, and she reminded him there was a promise made that your son will be the king. And gradually Kaikeyi starts to give in to this whole plot, and then she realizes, oh, Mantra, you have enlightened me with information that I would have never known. And then Mantra places that seed of conspiracy in her heart. And then Kaikeyi says, oh, now it's too late. Now what can I do? There's nothing much. I'm helpless. I think, this is my destiny. And then Mantra says, no. You remember, you had 2 boons that were given to you by Dashrath. So if you go back in the past time, once King Dashrath was fighting an army, and at that very moment he was injured, and he had Kaikeyi by his side, and at that time Kaikeyi took charge of the horse and took King Dashrath away to some other place where she nursed him back to health, and he recovered. And being pleased by Kaikeyi, he said, I give you 2 boons, ask them whenever you want. And she said, no, it's my duty to serve you, but if there's ever a need, I will ask you for those 2 boons. So Mantra then reminds Kaikeyi that you have those 2 boons. So Kaikeyi asks, what should those 2 boons be? And then Mantra tells her, first, ask Dashrath to make Bharat the king of Ayodhya. And second, ask Ram to go into exile. And to which Kaikeyi resisted, like, why should I ask Ram to go into exile? She said, no, because if tomorrow Bharat becomes the king, Ram in matter of few days may bring his army and dethrone Bharat. So you have to ask for those 2 boons. So as the pastime unfolds, King Dashrath is just absolutely devastated to hear what he's obligated to now do. And when Lord Ramachandra comes when Lord Ramachandra comes to the chambers where King Dashrath and KK are at, immediately he senses there is something wrong here. And it's described a lot of times. I've heard this from many devotees, especially described in Srila Prabhupada's books, how Bhagavan possesses all six opulences. He's full in strength, full of wealth, full of knowledge, full of fame, beauty, and renunciation. And to me, I always found the renunciation part to be a bit baffling. It was something that I really couldn't understand much. But here in this pastime, and we see the character of Lord Ramachandra, that the moment KK tells him, Dashrath is so distraught at this that he doesn't even want to share what's happened. So KK, becomes the person who's going to relay this information. And she tells Ram, actually your father had promised me these two boons, and now it's time for him to honor these two boons. And Lord Ramachandra, just to diffuse the temperature that's in the room, he says, my dear mom, I'm very disappointed with you. How could you have disturbed dad with such, two requests? These are such petty requests. You have considered me to be your son. Why can't you even speak to your son directly? You should have rather come to me directly and told me that these are the two boons. I would have left Ayodhya right away. In fact, now that you've told me, I'm going to leave Ayodhya right now. So here you see, even though Lord Ramachandra is Bhagavan, and even at he's not, if anyone else would have come to us, for example, if we do some service, and one day the authorities come to us, today you're not doing this service. From today onwards, the service has been given to someone. We'll resist. We'll say, oh, Prabhu, it's been, or whoever it is, I've been doing this service since time immemorial, and today you're telling me to walk away. But here you see Lord Ramachandra exhibiting such a character that it's hard for us to even conceive of. So then Lord Ramachandra, as I won't get into that because there are some other pastimes, but the lessons we take from it is, we may see Mantra as an evil person who did things, who just within a matter of a night, you can say, destroyed the harmony within the family. But the Acharyas say, if we compare Ayodhya to be our heart, then Mantra is like our mind. There's a beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 6, verse 6. For one who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But one who has failed to do so, the mind is the worst of enemies. So, a lot of times, our mind tells us so many things. It builds us, it tells all these conspiracy theories. And to combat our mind, we need to build our intellectual and ethical muscles. Intellectual muscles through the study of Shastra, and especially we've been given this axiom, Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. At any time we have any doubts or anything that comes in between us and our devotion to the Lord, we always go through these three axioms, Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. And that will protect us from any of the misgivings that our mind does. And these days especially, that's so rampant on the, out on social media, is anti-devotional propaganda that we come across. So many things that we read, we come across. One approach would be just avoid it altogether. But in case, even if we accidentally hear something, then we take shelter of some advanced practitioner of bhakti who can guide us and who can give us a balanced worldview of things. So, it's very important for us to don't give in to a mind with all of its
doubts and desires. It's said that doubt paralyzes a devotion and desires aggravate our worldly infatuation. So we have to be very careful, and that's what's being highlighted in this pastime here of mantra. So for myself, when I read through this, it really gave me that vision, or they gave me that understanding through which we can take the association of devotees, a guru and shastra more seriously and to advance further. The next pastime that I'd like to get into is again another conflict that happens between Vali and Sugriva, the two brothers that are described in the Ramayana. And it is described Vali and Sugriva were two brothers who just were inseparable. There was so much of love between the two. They were two Vanara brothers. So it just happened to be that Vali was the king of the, I believe that area was known as Kishkinda. So there was a very famous demon known as Mayavi who came, who challenged Vali that I need to fight with you. And Mayavi was so powerful that he could have terrorized the entire kingdom. So Vali took it upon himself to kill this demon. However, Sugriva, being the younger brother, said, I will accompany you to help fight this demon. However, Vali said, no, you please stay away. I'll go take care of this demon. So anyway, Vali follows Mayavi, and Mayavi, seeing the plight of these two brothers approaching him, just gets very, very affected by this. So Mayavi goes and takes shelter of a cave, and Vali, knowing that Mayavi has entered this cave, he tells Sugriva, you just stay outside this cave, and I'll go inside this cave, and I'll fight this demon. Sugriva asks again to come in to accompany him to the cave, but he said, no, it's a bit too dangerous. I'll go and fight this person, but you guard this cave. And it happens to be that Vali goes so deep into the cave that the Acharyas describe that it takes days. It's a very long time since Vali has gone into the cave, and no one knows about their whereabouts. And Sugriva is getting increasingly anxious because he knows how powerful this demon is. And who knows, maybe he went into this cave where he had all of his associates there, and maybe it's Vali against everyone. So time is just passing by, and all of a sudden he hears a loud cry. And it's very hard for Sugriva to discriminate as to whether there's that cry from Vali or Sugriva, and it seems like someone is being killed. And again Sugriva waits for some more time to just see if there's some more indication. And as time is passing by, Sugriva is getting increasingly concerned that maybe it's Vali who's been killed. So he has very little time to decide, and he says, okay, if Vali's been killed, he comes to terms with it, and he says, then the best thing is for me to put a boulder by this cave, because then Mayavi wouldn't be able to come out and terrorize the kingdom, and it'll give me enough time to go back and stabilize things there, and then if it happens, then I can we can combat Mayavi. So Sugriva is quite he's consoling this whole bereavement that's happened. So he goes back to his kingdom. He tells the advisors what's happened, and then the advisors tell him that it's time for you to take the throne. So Sugriva goes back and is trying his best to run the kingdom. However, at that very moment, it just turned out to be that Vali had killed Mayavi, but because he was so deep into the cave that it took a while for him to come up, and obviously he was quite depleted in his energy. So when he comes up with that expectation that Sugriva will be there, what does he see? A boulder closing the cave. And he tries to push the boulder, but because he's been so depleted, he can't. So he's trying his best. He tries one at a time, just with whatever energy that is left. And then while he's doing so, all of a sudden he gets suspicious. Why did Sugriva do that? Why did Sugriva put the boulder? Maybe it was his intention to take over the kingdom. And as he's struggling to to remove the boulder, all of these thoughts are coming into his mind, and he's becoming more and more convinced that this is why Sugriva has done so. And then finally he manages to break through the boulder and then go to the palace, and what does he see? Sugriva enjoying the comforts. And Sugriva is so elated to see his brother, but Vali is not. And Vali, it said that he pulls Sugriva down from the throne and just starts beating him up. Now, as it was described, and as we see, Vali succumbed to what you call as human attribution error, which is the error to just make up things on our own. We tend to if we were to see the perspective of both Vali and Sugriva, they would both be justified in explaining why they did certain things. And if you were to see, Sugriva had very little time to decide upon what to do, whereas Vali, being the older brother, had, he could have at least given the benefit of the doubt to at least hear out Sugriva why he chose to do what he did. But however, Vali was just absolutely oblivious to what had happened, but he chose to blame Sugriva, and he just, asked Sugriva, and Sugriva just ran away from the kingdom, just as a means of protecting himself. So, we all make errors in our judgment. Obviously, as being conditioned souls, we tend to see half-baked truths. We never consider both sides to the situation. So this is a perfect example of what that can lead to. Two brothers who were so inseparable today became, or at least for Vali, became the worst of enemies. So, especially in our devotional communities and within our own lives, certain situations may come about where, due to us judging someone based on the externals that we see, we fail to realize that what prompted them to act in that way. So Chaitanya Prabhu was describing, especially when it comes to reconciliation, to follow the 3A approach. Is there something that happens is that first A stands for acknowledge. Acknowledge in the sense that you go and introspect or check with other peers to see what is it that you may have done wrong. At least accept that maybe there's something possibly that could have been wrong on our side too. Second is you apologize. As words of criticism can hurt us, similarly, words of apology or anything spoken with a humble mind can also reproach the whole situation. And third A is you make amends. So not only do we acknowledge, apologize, but we also make amends. It says that actions speak louder than words. So when we do something to benefit the other person, or to, in one sense, show care for that other person, that has a far-reaching effect than anything else. The next pastime I'd like to speak about is a very short one, but it speaks about, it clearly outlines the character difference between Rama and Ravana. And it is said that Ravana had a very formidable army of demons, whereas Ram had a very, he just had monkeys. And if you really see, the demons had known Ravana for a fairly long time. He had conquered many different cities. Not did he brought all the riches of all the places that he conquered back to Lanka. So Lanka was very prosperous. So the demons were actually very prosperous. However, in the case of Ramachandra, the monkeys did not even know Lord Ramachandra for that long. In fact, the main king who was, on the side of Lord Ramachandra, Sugriva, was not even a king for that long. He was a king for a very short time. Some of the main monkey leaders were devotees of Lord Ram, so one can say maybe that extended through the other monkeys. However, there was one difference between Lord Ramachandra and Ravana, was that, and the point that's being made here is what we would say today is the popular notion of the use and throw culture. In that pastime of during the battle. It is said that Ravana would get a report of all the deaths that have happened on his camp, and he would tell his men, take the bodies of all these people and throw them away in the ocean, just throw them out so far from the sight of anyone that when the monkeys don't see any dead bodies of the opposite side, they'll feel so dejected that they haven't really killed anyone. So he's like, I don't care about the final rights of these people, but just throw away in the ocean. So day in, day out, that's what these demons would do. They would take away all the corpses, throw them away in the ocean, and Ravana would just be sitting comfortably in his palace every night, without having to. He wouldn't even be least concerned of what's happened. He would get the news, and every day he'd just be further more disappointed. Oh my God, so many deaths have happened. I don't even know what to do next. But however, he showed the least of affection for any of his men. However, Ram on the other end would perform the final rites of the monkey soldiers that have that died in this battle. And he would eat with them, he would sleep with them, he would basically pray along with them, and he would do everything possible to inspire them further. So in one sense, Ram was a hands-on person. And this inspiration is so important. The fact that each of us, that Ramchandra was inspiring every soldier. He was showing by example what we call in Bhakti is the principle of dasa, das, servant of the servant of the servant. How he was willing to just serve everyone. And in this instance, I'd like to bring about one story of Srila Prabhupada, how he would look beyond the externals to just inspire anyone in their service to him and to the mission. So I believe this pastime happened maybe somewhere in Germany and somewhere in America. So Srila Prabhupada tells Hamsaduta Prabhu, we need to now have a world Sankirtan party, and for that we need a bus. And Hamsaduta Prabhu is like, okay, I don't have any money. I don't know where will the bus come from. So he goes to one of his, hippie contacts and tells them, actually, we need a world, we want to travel the world and we need a bus. Hippie says, okay, take that bus. And that bus was something that you wouldn't even want to ride on, because that bus had no panes, it had no front panes, no side windows. But Hamsaduta Prabhu was so enthusiastic, he said, yes, we'll take this bus. So they somehow or the other bring the bus to Srila Prabhupada, and he said, Srila Prabhupada, the World Sankirtan Party bus is here. Prabhupada like, oh, okay, let's go. And they go to the bus. The bus doesn't even have any seats. There's only one seat, which is for the driver. So they take the bus, and Srila Prabhupada is like, okay, where will I sit? Like, oh, we didn't think about it. So they take a chair from the ashram, where Srila Prabhupada is at, and they put the chair for Srila Prabhupada. But when the bus would move, the chair would also move. So now what? So Brahmananda Prabhu says, okay, Prabhupada, you sit on the chair and I will hold the chair for you. Because obviously Brahmananda Prabhu was very, strong and he could do so. So Prabhupada, yes, let's do that. So they sit on the bus, there's Brahmananda Prabhu holding the chairs, and that Prabhupada, okay, start the engine. So the moment they start the engine, there's nothing but smoke that just comes out of the engine, and the car or the bus can't move any further. And Srila Prabhupada said, oh, looks like this is an Indian bus. And the devotees there, like they're thinking Prabhupada is giving some sort of compliment because they don't know anything about India, and Prabhupada is missing India so much. So, like, they were happy. This is an Indian bus, and they're like, oh, Prabhupada, thank you so much. Yes, but for World Sankirtan, we need some other bus. But I was listening to this pastime by Gauranga Prabhu, and he said that Srila Prabhupada was able to see the sincerity and the enthusiasm of these devotees, and for him these externals didn't matter. He saw the sincerity and he inspired them even further, and obviously, the World Sankirtan Party was started, and Srila Prabhupada wouldn't, consider these externals to be so important. More than talent and skill, he saw the sincerity and enthusiasm as being the key ingredient for bhakti. So we see here, similarly with Lord Ramachandra, if we are able to penetrate into this pastime, we see how the practice infuses within us a service, attitude toward him, because we see everyone as, a lot of times, even as devotees, or even, it can come upon that we may engage with some devotee, we may engage with each other in such a way that it may just be limited to just a service, but beyond that is the personal aspect. So how can we go about and not depersonalize others or their contribution and inspire them in each and every aspect of their service? So that's so much so that they feel inspired, and by their inspiration that can rub off on us. So lastly, the last concluding pastime of this of Ramayana is the battle between Lord Ramachandra and Ravana. So fast forward, Ravana has lost all of his key men in the battle, and as the news and the final straw in the scene is where his own brother Kumbhakarna has been just bamboozled away by Lord Ramachandra. So now Ravana says, "Now I'll have to step in," and as he steps into the war zone, it is said that he was actually in one sense invincible, because he could, he was being given all these boons by Lord Shiva, and he could, the monkeys were, just falling apart one after the other. And it happens to be that then Lord Ramachandra said, okay, now I'll have to go and personally fight Ravana. And obviously, Lord Ramachandra, knowing, Lord Ramachandra being the Supreme Personality of Godhead and being the most, expert archer, he was easily able to break through all of Ravana's formations, and so much so that when there's a one-on-one battle that's happening between the two, there comes a time when Ravana is actually weaponless. He doesn't have any weapons. And again there, Lord Ramachandra showing his glory, that I wouldn't want to combat with someone that doesn't have any weapons. He spares Ravana. He's like, go away and take some rest and come back tomorrow. And Ravana obviously retires to his palace, and he's thinking what's just happened. But he comes back the next day, and as again it all boils down to a one-on-one battle between the two. It is said that Lord Ramachandra is firing these arrows, and Ravana had 10 heads, so he would fire an arrow at each head, and it would appear that they've been chopped off, but then they would reappear again. And for a moment, it is described that Rama is thinking, what's happening? However, Vibhishana, who's the brother of Ravana, tells Rama, who's on the side of Rama, that actually each of his 10 heads, Ravana has been given this benediction that at any given time that he loses any of his heads, they'll all reappear. And his power is not in his heads, his power is actually in his heart. Everything's in his heart. So if you can just fire an arrow at his heart, that will seal the deal. So Rama then, meditates. He basically releases the arrow, and he fires his missile, and it goes and pierces straight through the heart of Ravana, and that's the end of this demon. Now, the Acharya described that as what's the significance of these heads disappearing and appearing. The Acharya described these heads are like our lower desires. At any given time, we're always faced with our, to the modes of the nature, to always engage with the lower modes of nature. And through them come all these lower desires. So when these lower desires appear and disappear, rather than us focusing on overcoming these desires, by the example that's given here, where Lord Ramachandra shot the arrow to the heart of Ravana. Similarly, if the Lord is in our heart, if we focus on directing a loving propensity towards engaging in devotional service to the Lord, that will help us overcome all these desires, rather than trying to eliminate these desires on its own. So it's an instructive pastime in which we see that because we all part and parcel of the Lord, Mamai Vamsa Jiva Loke Jiva Bhuta Sanatana. So it's our duty to engage in devotion service to the Lord. And as I say, bhakti is a process of the heart. So we engage in devotional service, which will help us overcome these desires. So the crux of this pastime is lust bites the dust. And Chidendran Prabhu breaks down this word dust to very digestible takeaway points, is that D in the dust stands for determination. There's a beautiful verse in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, verse 41. Those who are on this path are resolute in purpose, and those whose determination is irresolute, their intelligence is many branch. So similarly, when let's say if we are diagnosed with a curable disease that can be cured, but it gets very serious, so we will be determined to fight this disease by doing everything that's necessary for it. So we should be determined in our practice of bhakti to understand that these desires may come, however, take shelter of the process of Krishna consciousness, which will help us, and pray to Krishna to give us that determination that will help us overcome our anarthas. The U in the dust stands for understanding. We see in the Gita how in this world any of the desires that we chase, they promise a lot of things, but then what we get is much insignificant to what we were promised. It's one of the Devamrita Swami always says, this material world over-promises and under-delivers. So similarly, from studying the Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam, we understand that there is, whatever we do in this material world, whatever dreams and desires we may have on the bodily platform, today if we are happy with what we have, tomorrow will be morose. So there's always duality in this material world, and that's what we get by associating with these sacred texts and associating with devotees, getting that understanding. S stands for submission. So when we voluntarily submit ourselves to the will of the Lord, to the devotees, to the spiritual master, we are opening ourselves up to that grace that's there, that Krishna is willing to benedict us with. So we have to be submissive to the process of bhakti, in a sense that we be submissive to the orders of the spiritual master and to the advice that's given to us by sadhus through sadhu sangha. And T stands for training, is that we diligently take up the bhakti yoga process, through the process of chanting, through the process of studying the shastras, the process of serving the devotees with love and respect, and that through this analogy of dust, determination, understanding, submission and training, we'll be able to overcome the Ravana within us, which is there. However, we just need to understand, especially on the auspicious occasion of Ram Navami, we meditate on the pastime of Lord Ram with the intention of becoming more dear to Lord Ram, to be more dear to his loving devotees, and obviously